The first time I met Brianna was at a coffee shop just off campus. I was a sophomore working part-time as a barista, juggling my studies with the demands of earning enough to stay afloat. She walked in with an air of confidence, her laughter filling the small space as she joked with a friend. I couldn't help but notice her vibrant energy. When she ordered a chai latte, I accidentally gave her a cappuccino instead, leading to an awkward exchange that ended with her smiling and saying, "I'll give you a pass, this time." That chance encounter turned into more. We kept bumping into each other at campus events, and I finally mustered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was nothing glamorous, just burgers at a local diner and a late-night walk by the lake. But it was perfect. Brianna was studying criminal justice, her dream to work in law driving her determination. I was captivated by her ambition and her ability to make me laugh until my sides hurt. By the time we graduated, we had become inseparable. I secured an entry-level role at a publishing house, and Brianna found a position at a law firm. We worked long hours and lived in a tiny apartment with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but we were happy. It was during those years that we built the foundation of our life together. Long talks about our dreams, late-night dinners of cheap takeout, and laughter that echoed through those shabby walls. When our first child was born, life shifted in ways we couldn't have imagined. I remember holding her hand as she gave birth, marveling at her strength and the new chapter unfolding before us. Brianna temporarily stepped back from her career, pouring herself into motherhood while I climbed the corporate ladder. Despite the sleepless nights and endless diapers, we were a team, balancing the chaos with love and unwavering support for one another. As our family grew, so did the demands on our time and energy. We moved into a modest house, gradually transforming it into a home filled with memories. Brianna returned to work once our youngest started kindergarten, excelling as a paralegal. Watching her thrive professionally while managing our family with grace only deepened my admiration for her. Our days were hectic, but we always made time for each other, weekly date nights and summer vacations where we'd reconnect away from the noise of everyday life. Looking back now, I realize those early years were filled with milestones that shaped us. Every triumph, every challenge, and every compromise brought us closer. We'd weathered storms before, financial stress, career shifts, and raising children, but nothing had prepared me for the crossroads we were about to face. The signs had been there, subtle yet persistent, but I was too blind to acknowledge them. For several weeks, the clues had been right before me, yet I failed to see them. My wife, Brianna, had begun lavishing me with an unusual amount of care and attention. Instead of the usual quick toast and coffee in the mornings, she started preparing elaborate breakfasts. Evening meals became a celebration of my favorite dishes, often accompanied by wine. She'd then appear in new lingerie, shower me with affection, and entice me to bed earlier than usual. Did I question this transformation in our 24 years together? Not at all. I welcomed the change as a refreshing turn in our routine. After our youngest child left for college a few months ago, I resolved to show Brianna how much I appreciated her. I made it a point to be home by 5 every evening. We began enjoying upscale dinners, attending local theater shows, and even tried dancing, a hobby we hadn't explored in years. I brought her flowers regularly and eagerly embraced this new phase of our empty nest lifestyle. My name is Tyler Winslow, though everyone calls me Ty. My wife, Brianna, Bree for short, and I had been married for almost 25 years. Like any relationship, we had our ups and downs, but the good times far outweighed the challenges. I was content with our life. I work as a senior director at a major publishing house, having climbed the ladder over 2 decades. My expertise spans every aspect of publishing, reviewing manuscripts, working with authors, coordinating with designers, negotiating contracts, managing budgets, and overseeing marketing and film rights. Introducing new authors and their books to the world has always been a point of pride for me. Brianna, nearly 45 years old and stunningly beautiful, has a career of her own. Thanks to good genes, a healthy lifestyle, and proper nutrition, we've both aged gracefully. People often compliment us as a striking couple. Since our youngest started kindergarten, Bree has been working as a paralegal at the prestigious law firm Thomas, Dixon & Harris. Over time, she was promoted to manage the paralegal team, overseeing assignments and workflow for the entire department. Everything changed last Wednesday. I came home as usual around 5 p.m. and found Bree in the kitchen, preparing dinner. For weeks now, her meals had been more elaborate and thoughtful than ever before. I kissed the back of her head as I walked in. Typically, Bree would turn to kiss me properly, but this time she didn't. No grand welcome kiss for me today? I teased. She responded without looking up. I'm just glad you're home. Her tone felt distant, as if she was avoiding even a brief moment of connection. Is something wrong? I asked. Nothing at all, she replied quickly. Go change, and I'll have a glass of your favorite wine ready when you come back down. Though her response felt dismissive, I brushed off my unease and went upstairs. After hanging up my suit and tossing my shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into more comfortable clothes, a pair of Dockers and a sweatshirt. Dinner that night wasn't extravagant, but it was clear she'd put thought into it. We started with a simple salad of lettuce and tomatoes, followed by a main course of roasted pork served over cauliflower rice. As we toasted with glasses of wine, Bree looked at me and said, You know I love you, right? There was something different in her voice. This wasn't the usual casual I love you we exchanged daily. I nodded, replying, And I love you too. After dinner, we cleared the table as usual. I loaded the dishwasher while Bree stored the leftovers. She excused herself to go upstairs and change into something more comfortable. Anticipating another romantic evening, I eagerly followed her lead. When I entered the dimly lit living room, I saw Bree reclining on the sofa in a revealing negligee that barely covered her. Her beauty took my breath away. Without hesitation, I knelt by the sofa and kissed her deeply. The moment was electric. My kisses trailed from her lips to her bare shoulders, and soon her negligee slipped off, exposing her chest. Her figure was stunning, and I couldn't help but admire her, as if for the first time. You love me, don't you, Ty? She whispered. You'll always love me no matter what? Of course, I assured her without hesitation. I quickly undressed and joined her on the sofa, where our passion ignited once more. Half an hour later, we lay entwined, savoring the afterglow. That night, she seemed more fervent than ever. It feels so good to rediscover the spark we've missed over the years, I said, kissing her gently. Our conversation drifted to compliments about how well we both maintained ourselves over the years. I teased that she could easily pass for someone in her early 30s, while she playfully ran her hand over my abs, praising my fitness. Just as I was drifting off, Bree's voice pulled me back. Honey, there's something I need to tell you, she said softly. Anything, I murmured, still half asleep. You know how much I love you, right? Her voice was barely audible. Yes, and I love you just as much, I replied. She hesitated before continuing. Darling, she began carefully. This Friday, I've made plans to meet someone from my office for the night. Her words hung in the air for a moment before they truly registered. When they did, I stood up abruptly and locked eyes with her. What is this? I asked, my voice firm. She tried to pull me back down, urging my head to rest on her chest again, but I resisted. No, seriously, what are you talking about? I pressed. It doesn't change anything about how we feel for each other, she said softly. I'll still love you, and you'll still love me. I blinked, taken aback. You can't be serious. Is this some kind of joke? She shook her head. No, Ty, I'm not joking. I have a date this Saturday with a man from my office. We're going out for dinner and dancing. After that, we'll go to his hotel room and I'll spend the night with him. I'll be back home late Sunday morning. I stared at her, stunned. So what you're really saying is that you're planning to spend Saturday night and Sunday morning sleeping with some guy. Don't put it like that, she said, frowning. That's crude and unnecessary. He's a good man and I like him. The shock jolted me fully awake. I began pulling on my clothes, signaling that our moment of closeness was over. It was clear to her that I was furious. Ty, please don't react this way, she pleaded. I still love you and you still love me. It's just this one time, and then it'll be over. In a week, everything will go back to the way it was and you'll forget about it. Forget about it? I snapped, disbelief dripping from my words. Who is this guy, Bree? Why are you trying to ruin everything we've built now when things are so good? She tightened the sash of her satin robe and replied, His name doesn't matter. It's not something you need to know, and I don't want you doing anything reckless. Besides, he's bigger than you, and he could hurt you if it came to that. Oh, trust me, I shot back. With my rage and a baseball bat, he wouldn't stand a chance. She sighed. It's just one night, Ty. He's leaving for New York on Sunday evening for good. He won't be back. He better leave, I growled, because if he doesn't, the next time he walks into court, it'll be on crutches. As my initial rage simmered, a deep sense of loss began to set in. Bree and I had been together for over 2 decades. She was my first and only lover. Temptations had come and gone, but I'd never acted on them. Now, this? How long has this been going on? I demanded. It's not a thing, she said, avoiding my gaze. We've barely touched. What does that even mean? Holding hands? Hugging? Kissing? Or more? I pressed, needing clarity. She stayed silent, which only confirmed my worst fears. If it had been something less passionate, she would have admitted it outright. Finally, she explained, he came to our firm about 6 months ago from a top New York law office to assist with a complex tax case. I worked closely with him, research, charts, graphs for court. Over time, we became close. 2 months ago, he told me he had feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. But I didn't want to sneak off to some cheap motel or do something inappropriate at work. This was different. It needed to be special. He suggested I find a way to take a night away. I told him I couldn't lie to you. He asked if you might allow it just once. I wasn't sure, but I hoped you'd understand that this would only be a one-time thing and wouldn't change anything between us. Why? I demanded. Why would you risk everything we have? We're happy. We love each other. We have an incredible marriage, amazing kids, no financial worries, and our health. Why would you jeopardize that? She hesitated. Because my friend made me realize I've only ever been with you. He showed me what I might be missing. I just want to know what it's like. This will be enough. It'll make me feel whole. He cares about me, and I care about him. It's not some tawdry affair. But Bree, I protested, we have something rare and beautiful. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I thought I was the only man you'd ever been with. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I need this. I want this. I want him. Why? I asked, desperate for a reason. She sighed deeply. He's so attractive, Ty. He's younger than me, but still finds me irresistible. I'm drawn to him in a way I can't explain. I just need to experience this, or I'll regret it forever. He feels the same way. Please, let me do this. Afterward, I'll be yours completely. I'll never agree to this, I replied firmly. It'll destroy us, Bree. It'll ruin our marriage. No, it won't, she insisted. Once it's over, I'll be the best wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, keep the house immaculate, do the laundry, the shopping, everything. I'll be the perfect partner in every way, including the bedroom. You can have me anytime, however you want. I'll treat you like a king for the rest of our lives. I promise I'll never touch another man again. And I'll have to live with the fact that my wife slept with another man, I said bitterly. Do you know how humiliating that is for a man? It's the ultimate betrayal. You'll have to accept it, she said firmly. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to. It won't change anything between us. You'll still love me, and I'll still love you. So that's what all the affection and attention over the last 2 months was about, I said coldly. It wasn't about us becoming empty nesters. You were trying to soften me up so I wouldn't push back on this insane idea. Well, guess what, Bree? That's not going to happen. Bree stood firm, unmoved by any of my arguments or objections. Her mind was made up and she wasn't going to reconsider. I didn't resort to pleading. She would have to deal with the fallout of her choices, whatever that might mean. I didn't yet know what consequences lay ahead. I went to our bedroom, packed a few items I'd need for the next day, grabbed my toiletries, and relocated to the guest room, which had its own attached bathroom in our spacious home. As I was moving my belongings, Bree tried to stop me. Don't do this, Ty, she said. Nothing's going to change. I know you're upset now, but by Sunday afternoon, this will all be behind us. We'll go back to being us. I paused, meeting her gaze. I'm not just upset, Bree, I replied, keeping my tone calm but resolute. If you go through with this, we'll never be us again. I closed the guest room door without waiting for her response. Inside, I was left alone with my thoughts, which swirled chaotically. I considered all the possible responses: divorce, moving out, demanding that Bree leave, physically stopping her from going, even telling her parents or our kids. But none of these options felt right. I couldn't bring myself to divorce her. I still loved her, despite her lapse in judgment. I wasn't about to leave my own home either, and evicting her, while tempting, felt extreme. I also doubted that involving her family or ours would solve anything. If Bree chose to call off her plans, it needed to be her decision, not one coerced by outside pressure. Otherwise, it might just push her into being more secretive in the future. It was Thursday evening, and it was clear that Bree had waited until the last minute to tell me. This tactic limited the time I had to process, respond, or try to prevent her from following through. I was terrified. She admitted to having feelings for this man, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she considering leaving me now that the kids were out of the house? The thought shattered me. What if she found their night together more satisfying than our closeness? What if this opened the door to more? For 25 years, Bree and I had shared a comfortable, familiar closeness. There weren't many surprises left in our physical relationship, but I still found her incredibly attractive. Whether she wore a sleek black dress, a hot negligee, or just a towel, her body had never stopped exciting me. But now, as much as I feared the future, I started to consider ways to stop her. Could I somehow prevent her from going through with this? If her Prince Charming left town before they met, I'd have time to remind her of what she was risking. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure she never entertained an idea like this again. Before I finally fell asleep late that night, I devised a plan. Talking Bree out of her decision seemed impossible, but perhaps her employer could intervene. I knew that Thomas, Dixon, and Harris, the law firm where Bree worked, had strict rules against workplace relationships. If I spoke to one of the senior partners about her situation, they might confront her about how her actions could affect her career. The next morning, I woke up first. Normally, I'd brew coffee for Bree before leaving for work, but not today. When she greeted me with a hesitant, "Good morning," I didn't reply in kind. All I said was, "Don't do this," before leaving the house without our usual goodbye kiss. I knew she noticed the shift in my behavior. Later that morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. Their firm occupied the top floor of a modern skyscraper. The reception area was as sleek and impressive as I remembered from past events, an open layout with plush seating, a fully stocked bar, and walls adorned with tasteful artwork. Seated at the central reception desk was Emily Stratton, the firm's office manager. Emily and I had crossed paths many times over the years at local events, and while we weren't close, we were friendly acquaintances. Despite being in her mid-50s, Emily carried herself with grace and poise. Her conservative attire never drew attention to her figure, but she had an understated elegance that didn't go unnoticed. With her golden hair always pulled into a bun and glasses perched on her nose, she exuded professionalism. Emily's face lit up when she saw me walk in. "Tyler, what a nice surprise," she said warmly, stepping out from behind her desk to greet me. She gave me a quick hug, her cheerful demeanor temporarily lifting my gloom. "Emily," I said with a faint smile, "I need to speak with Mr. Thomas. It's personal and important." Her expression grew serious. "This is about Brianna, isn't it?" she asked perceptively. I hesitated before answering vaguely. "Maybe." Emily nodded knowingly and adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Thomas is just finishing up a meeting," she said, checking his schedule. "He has about half an hour before he heads out for lunch with clients." "I'll make sure he has a moment to talk with you." I thanked her and took a seat in the waiting area. A few minutes later, Emily brought me a cup of coffee. "I added a splash of Bailey's," she said with a wink. "You look like you need it." Her gesture of kindness brought a faint smile to my face, but my mind was still focused on the difficult conversation ahead. I only hoped that William Thomas could help me stop Bree before it was too late. Moments later, the intercom on Emily's desk buzzed. "I'm back in my office, Emily," came Mr. Thomas's voice. Emily seized the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, Tyler Winslow is here. He's hoping to speak with you for a few minutes. It's important." There was a brief pause. Mr. Thomas replied thoughtfully. "If you think it's worth my time, send him in. I can spare about 5 minutes before my next appointment." Emily guided me through a pair of glass doors, down a short hallway, and to a large, intricately carved wooden door. She opened it, gesturing for me to step inside, and then closed it quietly behind me. The office was impressive, spacious and meticulously arranged. Mr. Thomas stood near his expansive desk, which was flanked by several chairs. On the opposite side of the room, a comfortable sitting area featured a sofa, an armchair, and a coffee table. The walls were adorned with framed degrees, awards, and plaques, underscoring his success. He stepped around the desk, extending his hand warmly. "Tyler, good to see you. How's life? Still in publishing?" "I'm doing okay," I replied, though my tone lacked enthusiasm. "Well, if Emily thinks it's important, it must be. What's on your mind?" As I stood there, I hesitated. The weight of the conversation suddenly felt overwhelming. Still, I forced myself to begin. "I hate to bring this to you, Mr. Thomas. Honestly, it's embarrassing." "What's going on, Ty?" he asked, his tone both curious and sincere. I took a deep breath. "My wife, Brianna, works here. She's told me she plans to spend Saturday night with one of your associates. I've tried everything to dissuade her, but she's adamant. Mr. Thomas, ever the sharp lawyer, grasped the situation immediately. So, you're hoping I can step in? Maybe have a word with Brianna or this associate? That was my intention when I came here, I admitted. But now I think I've made a mistake. This is my problem, and I need to handle it myself. He nodded slowly, considering my words. You're aware, of course, that our firm has policies about workplace relationships, especially within the same department. Those policies exist to protect us from potential issues like conflicts of interest or legal liability. Yes, I'm aware, I said quietly. Placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder, he continued. Our fraternization policy isn't as robust as it should be. I've been meaning to tighten it, add clear consequences for violations. Unfortunately, I can't rewrite policy overnight, and certainly not before Saturday. I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. Thank you for your time, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this. I need to figure out how to deal with it on my own. Good luck, Ty, he said as I turned to leave. I stepped back into the reception area, where Emily was waiting with a curious look. How did it go? She asked. It was a mistake to bring this to him, I admitted. I feel foolish. Emily gave me a kind smile. You're being too hard on yourself. Sit down and take a moment. I'll bring you another coffee or something stronger if you'd prefer. I sank into one of the plush chairs in the waiting area, running my hands over my face as my thoughts raced. I felt defeated, completely out of options. Bree seemed determined to go through with her plans, and I didn't know how to stop her. Overwhelmed, I leaned forward, my head in my hands. Emily's cheerful voice broke through my despair. Come on, Ty, let's go to lunch. My treat. I hesitated, but the idea of stepping away and clearing my head was appealing. I agreed, and Emily arranged for a colleague to cover for her while she took an extended break. As we walked to a nearby restaurant she liked, she linked her arm with mine in a gesture of support. Over iced tea, Emily gently encouraged me to open up. I hesitated, but eventually I told her everything. She listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. After we ordered, she chose soup and half a sandwich while I picked at a Caesar salad. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics. When we finished eating, Emily ordered coffee for both of us, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Emily broke the silence with something unexpected. Did you know my late husband was a fighter pilot? I knew you were widowed, I replied, but I didn't know he was a pilot. Her expression softened. Joe was my hero. We married right after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He flew A-10S, the Warthog, as they call it. He served 2 tours in the Middle East before he was tragically eliminated in a training accident. I listened as she recounted his service, including the honors he received. The Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, but there was pride in her words. Joe used to tell me about air combat strategies, she continued. One scenario stuck with me. When facing a single enemy fighter, a 2-plane formation would split up. The enemy had to pick a target, pursue one, and leave the other free to attack, or try to target both and fail. Either way, the enemy lost. Emily's story intrigued me, though I wasn't sure what she was driving at. Are you talking about Bree's date? I asked. She smiled, her eyes sharp with meaning. Give her a choice, Ty. No matter what she chooses, make sure you win. Her words hung in the air as she reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Her smile was disarming, filled with quiet encouragement, and for the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. After lunch with Emily, I went back to the office, immersing myself in work to avoid going home to Bree. The thought of spending an evening in her company, pretending everything was normal, felt unbearable. Later, I stopped by the Iris Club, a cozy spot where I could enjoy a few drinks with friends and momentarily distract myself. It was almost 10 p.m. when I finally returned home, and Bree was waiting for me, her frustration evident. You didn't even bother to call, she said, her tone sharp. I went out of my way to make a nice dinner for us. It's sitting in the fridge. I was hoping we could spend some time together tonight, maybe even reconnect. And now I can smell the booze on you. Yes, I had a few drinks, I replied bluntly. I stayed out because I didn't want to face this situation tonight. I needed to forget, just for a little while, about what you're planning tomorrow. I headed toward the guest room without waiting for her response. I'm tired and going to bed. Her voice followed me down the hallway. Don't worry, Ty. Tomorrow will come and go, and this will all be behind us. We'll go back to how things were before. I didn't reply. I simply shut the door, stripped to my boxers, and collapsed onto the guest bed, exhaustion and frustration weighing heavily on me. The next morning, I was up early. I downed a quick breakfast, just coffee and toast, and headed outside to work on the yard. Mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, and tidying up the space gave me something to focus on. When I came back inside, sweaty and tired, Bree was getting ready to head out. "I've got a spa appointment," she announced nonchalantly. "Manicure, pedicure, the whole thing. I'll be back in a few hours." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her. "Bree, don't do this," I said quietly but firmly. "It won't end the way you think it will." She paused briefly but didn't respond, disappearing through the door and leaving me alone once again. When she returned later that afternoon, it was clear she'd gone all out. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant style, her nails painted a bold, vibrant red. She looked radiant, too radiant. I could tell she was preparing for something special. Meanwhile, I'd been busy as well. The living room had been transformed, the furniture rearranged, and the rug rolled up to reveal an open space. Bree stopped in her tracks, taking in the room. "What's going on, Ty? Why is the rug rolled up, and why is the coffee table pushed to the side?" "I made room for dancing," I said casually. "I thought we could have a romantic evening together." She crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her face. "What are you trying to pull?" "Nothing underhanded," I replied. "I just want to show you that staying home tonight would be the better choice. Let me show you something." I gestured toward the dining room. Reluctantly, she followed me. I'd set the table with meticulous care, using our best china, crystal glasses, and silver flatware. A bouquet of roses sat in the center, flanked by 2 tall candles, their warm glow creating a passionate atmosphere. It was the kind of table you'd find in a high-end restaurant. "Ty," she said slowly, her voice firm, "I see what you're doing, but it's not going to work. You know I already have plans tonight." "I know what your plans are," I said evenly. "But plans can change. Sometimes something better comes along. Are you really going to disappoint me for him?" "Ty, don't do this to yourself," she said, shaking her head. Ignoring her words, I led her to the kitchen where the evening's menu was already underway. "Let me walk you through what I've prepared," I began. "We'll start with a chilled green gazpacho, garnished with chopped yellow tomatoes and cucumber. Then, a crisp salad of iceberg lettuce with avocado and bacon, drizzled with ranch dressing. To cleanse the palate, I've made a lime sorbet." "Ty, stop," she said softly. "You're putting so much effort into this, and it's not going to change my mind," I continued, undeterred. "The main course is a pork chop stuffed with rice and herbs, finished with a béarnaise sauce. On the side, asparagus sautéed with garlic butter and creamy potato gratin. For dessert, a scoop of vanilla ice cream with green crème de menthe. We'll finish with coffee and your choice of liqueur." Bree sighed, exasperation mingled with guilt. "It sounds amazing, but I'm leaving tonight. I even bought a new dress for the occasion." She turned and headed upstairs. I heard the shower running as I went to our bedroom to change. I put on a pair of black pants, a fitted black shirt, and leather dance shoes. A formal suit seemed unnecessary for a dinner at home. When Bree came downstairs, my heart sank. She was stunning. Her black dress hugged her figure perfectly, with a neckline that drew attention to her décolletage. The hemline stopped modestly above her knees, but the slit along the side climbed daringly high, revealing a glimpse of her stocking tops as she moved. Her heels, adorned with delicate diamond-studded straps, added the finishing touch. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning slightly to show off the ensemble. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my tone calm. "You look incredible," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Like you're dressed to impress someone, but not me." "It's a special night, Ty. I wanted to look my best. Don't worry, I'll wear this for you another time," she said dismissively, walking past me toward the door. As I flipped through the radio stations, George Michael's Careless Whisper came on, a song that always pulled at my emotions. I turned up the volume, letting the familiar melody wash over me. "Can I have one last dance before you go?" I asked softly. Bree hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right, just one." I walked over, gently took her hand, and pulled her into a slow embrace. We swayed to the rhythm, her body close against mine. The scent of her perfume was achingly familiar, stirring memories of better times. "You're wearing English leather," she murmured, a faint smile on her lips. "I know it's your favorite," I replied. As the song reached its final verses, I trailed soft kisses along her cheek and down her neck. She sighed, her response almost instinctive, a gentle sound of contentment. Encouraged, I slid my hand to the strap of her dress, easing it off her shoulder while kissing her neck. She froze, pulling back abruptly. "No, Ty, don't. You know I'm leaving tonight. We can do this another time." I held her gaze for a moment, my voice low and steady. "It's not too late to change your mind." Her expression hardened. "I'm not changing my plans, Ty. I told you I'm going on this date, and I don't want you to ruin it." Exhaling slowly, I stepped back. "All right, Bree, I won't interfere anymore. You've made your choice, and I see it's final. But before you walk out that door, there are two things I want you to do." Suspicion flickered across her face. "What are they?" "First," I said, gesturing toward the dining room, "I want you to see what I've done. Look at the table I set for us tonight. I want you to remember it as you walk out." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. The scene was passionate and romantic, a picture of what could have been. Bree glanced at the setup and shrugged. "We can have a romantic dinner another time, Ty." I stepped closer, took her left hand, and carefully slid off her wedding and engagement rings. "Second, I don't want you touching him while wearing the rings I gave you. These are symbols of us, and you're choosing to leave them behind tonight." Her eyes widened slightly as I placed the rings, along with my own wedding band, on the small hallway table. For a moment, she looked uncomfortable, even guilty. "Okay," she said quietly. As Bree reached for her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. Both of us turned toward the sound, surprised. Through the frosted glass, a figure stood silhouetted. "Who could that be at this hour?" she muttered, moving to open the door. When she did, her voice caught in a mix of surprise and confusion. "Emily? What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, taking Emily's hand and guiding her inside. Bree's eyes darted to Emily's outfit, a striking cocktail dress far removed from her usual conservative work attire. The scarlet dress clung to Emily's curves, with off-the-shoulder straps tied in delicate bows. Her legs were accentuated by French-style red stockings, and her updo was decorated with a ribbon matching her dress. "Ty invited me," Emily said smoothly, her gaze drifting to the candlelit dining table. "He promised me an evening of romance, dinner by candlelight, slow dancing, and cozying up by the fireplace. How could I say no?" Bree's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. "You look so different from how you dress at work," she blurted out. Emily smirked, adjusting the strap of her dress. "I like to dress up for special occasions. And you look stunning, too. That dress will be fun for Stanley to take off." Bree froze. "Stanley? How do you know about him?" Emily laughed lightly, her tone almost mocking. "Oh, everyone in the paralegal department knows about Stanley. The tax department, too. Stanley isn't exactly subtle." Bree's cheeks flushed. "We tried to be discreet." "Discreet?" Emily interrupted with a laugh. "From the moment Stanley arrived, he made his intentions obvious, and you didn't resist. Shorter skirts, plunging necklines, more makeup, and his favorite perfume. Honestly, you were an open book." Bree looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was supposed to be harmless, just a little flirting. Then I got caught up in it. I thought it would be just one night." I stepped forward, draping her shawl over her shoulders and guiding her toward the door. "One night, huh? Fine. Go, but don't come back until tomorrow morning. I've given you every chance to stay with me, but you chose him." Bree hesitated for a moment, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. "I'll be back," she said quietly as she stepped onto the porch. "Have fun tonight," I said, closing the door behind her. For a moment, I stood in silence, hearing her car pull away. My chest felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Things would never be the same again. Emily approached, her expression softening. "I can't imagine how you feel, Ty," she said gently. "But remember, no matter what choice Bree makes, you've already won." She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. Her lips met mine, a gentle, reassuring kiss that slowly deepened. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer as the kiss became more passionate. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily. "Let's not waste the evening," Emily said with a small smile. "Show me this dinner you've prepared." I told Emily that dinner wasn't quite ready, but invited her to help if she felt like it. She agreed with a smile, following me into the kitchen. I pointed to 3 open bottles of wine, a crisp Chardonnay, a bold Cabernet, and a sweeter dessert option. She chose the Chardonnay. After pouring her a glass and tasting it myself, I playfully slipped an apron over her head and tied it around her waist. Standing behind her, I gave her a quick kiss, which made her laugh. "What's my assignment, chef?" she asked, clearly enjoying herself. "I've already baked half a pound of bacon," I said. "I need you to cut 5 strips into 1-inch pieces and mix them with the chopped iceberg lettuce. Then, dice the avocado and add it to the mix." While Emily worked, sipping her wine and chatting lightly, a sudden wave of self-doubt crept in. I glanced at her, the most stunning woman I'd ever been close to, and couldn't shake the thought that I might not measure up. My entire life I'd only been with one woman, Bree, while Emily might have had far more experience. The thought unnerved me. I stepped up behind her, gently placing my hands on her waist. "I've only ever made love to Bree," I confessed quietly. "It makes me worry that I won't be good enough for you." Emily paused and leaned back against me, her tone reassuring. "Ty, you have nothing to worry about. Just treat me the way you'd treat Bree, and let's see where it goes. If I want something different, I'll tell you, and if there's something you want, just say so. Whatever it is." She turned her head slightly and added with a playful smile, "And, by the way, I love foreplay." I kissed the back of her head, feeling a flicker of confidence return. "Thanks. Have you ever been a cheerleader? You sure know how to inspire someone." She laughed. "The salad's done," she announced, taking the bowl into the dining room. I followed, pulling out her chair and helping her sit before taking my own seat at the head of the table. Before starting, I refilled our glasses and raised mine for a toast. "To an unforgettable night," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I'll drink to that," I replied. Dinner unfolded beautifully. I served each course, and Emily complimented every dish, calling it a 5-star meal that could rival any fine dining experience. When dessert was finished, I told her to relax in the family room while I tidied up. Once the dining area was spotless, I joined her. The soft sounds of rain and distant thunder played on the stereo, creating a soothing backdrop. Emily was gently swaying to the music, lost in the moment. When I approached, she held out her hands, inviting me to dance. We moved together slowly, the closeness of the moment deepening. "This is perfect, Ty," she murmured. "It's been so long since I felt this romantic." "I feel the same," I admitted. After a moment of silence, she added, "For what it's worth, I haven't been with a man in years. And when I have, it's only been with men I truly liked. I really like you, Ty." "That's good to know," I said, pulling her a little closer. "If I tell you I love you at some point tonight, don't be mad. I'll mean it, at least for as long as we're together. And when this ends, I hope we can stay close." The music slowed, and so did we, eventually just holding each other. Her arms were around my neck, mine resting on her waist. Her breath was warm against my skin as she ran her fingers through the hair at the back of my neck. I felt her body pressed against mine, her curves, her warmth. She must have felt my reaction, too. I leaned down and began to kiss her neck and collarbone, savoring her soft sighs. As the moment intensified, Emily gently stepped back. "Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable," she said with a teasing smile. "Feel free to do the same. Let's meet by the fireplace." I went to my room, slipping into black silk pajama pants and a matching t-shirt. Pouring myself a coffee with a splash of Bailey's, I settled on the couch to wait. A few minutes later, I heard her approach. Before I could turn, Emily's arms wrapped around the back of the couch. Her hands slid under my shirt, and she kissed my neck, sending a jolt of warmth through me. I turned onto my back, looking up at her. She stood there in a black satin robe, the fabric loosely tied at the waist. Beneath it, I could see the delicate lace of a negligee. Her hair was down, framing her face, and her legs were bare. I reached for her hand, pulling her over the back of the couch. She landed on me with a laugh, her robe parting slightly. I couldn't resist leaning up to kiss her. What started as a gentle kiss quickly deepened, her lips parting as we shared a passionate embrace. My hands roamed over her back, slipping the robe off her shoulders to reveal her smooth skin and the soft fabric of her negligee. She was breathtaking. I let the robe slide down her arms until it pooled on the floor, leaving her in just the negligee that clung to her figure. I kissed her again, losing myself in the moment, unable to resist her allure. As my kisses moved lower, I traced a path down Emily's body, lingering at her navel before continuing to her thighs. She began to writhe beneath me, her breathing quick and shallow. "I love you, Ty," she whispered between breaths. "I love you too, Emily," I replied, my words barely breaking the rhythm of the moment. I didn't want this night to end. I knew it would be the last time we shared something so passionate, and it seemed Emily felt the same. Tears slipped from her eyes as she clung to me. I held her tightly, kissing her lips, her face, and her neck as though trying to hold on to the moment. Eventually, we both sighed, the reality of dawn drawing the night to a close. I stepped out of the shower first, giving Emily time to finish while I dried off and dressed in casual clothes. She emerged moments later, and I handed her a soft, oversized towel. She had brought a change of clothes, and soon we were both ready to leave the house. "Do you want to grab brunch?" I asked. Her face lit up, and she nodded. "I'd love that." We headed to a nearby cheesecake factory in a bustling shopping center. It was just opening when we arrived at 10 a.m., and we lingered over coffee and conversation before heading back. By the time I returned home around noon, Bree's car was already in the garage. I entered through the side door, passing through the kitchen, where I noticed a pot of coffee on the stove. Pouring myself a cup, I made my way to the dining room and found Bree seated at the table, a coffee cup in front of her. Her posture was rigid, her expression stern. In contrast, I felt calm, almost smug. A faint smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. It was time to address the elephant in the room. "So," I began, "how was your evening?" "Fine," Bree replied flatly, her tone guarded. "And yours?" she asked pointedly. "Honestly," I said, leaning back with a satisfied grin, "it was incredible. Emily was affectionate and eager, and we spent the night exploring ways to make each other happy." Bree lowered her head, and I saw a single tear roll down her cheek. Guilt surged through me. This wasn't the victory it had seemed in the moment. It felt more like the biggest mistake of my life. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Didn't Stanley live up to your expectations?" "It wasn't Stanley," she snapped, then softened. "It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily, about what you were doing together. She's so beautiful, so alluring. I knew you'd have a better time with her than I ever could with Stanley." She took a deep breath before continuing. "He tried to be gentle, to make the night romantic, but I couldn't focus. I started drinking wine at the bar before dinner. By the time we sat down, I'd already had too much. I barely touched my food, I couldn't eat, and just kept drinking. Stanley tried to stop me, suggested we dance in the living room to lighten the mood, but I was tipsy and clumsy. He grew frustrated and said we should go upstairs. She hesitated, her voice shaking. In the room, he kissed me, but it felt wrong. Then he started undressing me, and I didn't resist. I let him, but I felt nothing. No excitement, no connection. He could tell. When it was over, he looked at me with disappointment and said, "That was the worst experience of my life. What's wrong with you? You wanted this, and now you're acting like you don't care." He got dressed and left, muttering something about finding someone else at the bar. I just lay there and cried myself to sleep. Her voice grew quieter. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun was shining, and I felt empty. I showered, dressed, and left the hotel. I wanted to come home and talk to you, but you weren't here. "Emily and I went to brunch," I said plainly. "She went home afterward. I'll admit, I'm sorry your night didn't go as planned, but I'm not entirely sorry. Mine did." Bree's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I'm so sorry, Ty," she said earnestly. "I regret ever getting involved with Stanley. Now I see it for what it was. He just wanted to use me. He never cared about me." I leaned back, my tone sharp. "Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time." "There won't be a next time," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I'll never do this again. I want us to go back to being monogamous, to the way things were before. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the wife you deserve." "Not so fast, Bree," I said firmly. "You've spent months building an emotional relationship with him and weeks plotting this night together. Now that it's blown up in your face, you want me to forget everything and pretend it never happened? That's not how this works. I'm not even sure I want to stay married to you. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to turn me into a fool. And now you expect me to forgive and forget like nothing happened? No, Bree. It doesn't work like that." Bree sat silently, tears streaming down her face, as the weight of my words hung in the air. Bree's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of desperation and hope, but I continued without hesitation. "Next year, I'm making some changes for myself. I'm getting a gym membership, and once a month, I'll take myself out on a date with whoever I choose. If those dates lead to something more, so be it. At the end of the year, I'll reassess our marriage. If I decide it's no longer working for me, I'll file for divorce. If I find I'm happy, I'll consider becoming exclusive with you again." You'll have this year to prove that staying together is worth it. Take it or leave it. If you can't accept these terms, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know your decision." Bree's voice trembled as she began to speak. "Ty, I love you. I know I've taken you for granted and I regret it deeply. The thought of you being with another woman would liquidate me just like last night did. But losing you entirely, that would destroy me. I'll agree to your conditions. And I promise I'll spend this year showing you I can be the best wife you've ever dreamed of. By the end of it, I'll make sure you'll never want to leave me." "Then it's settled," I said simply. The rest of the day passed without incident. I spent some time working in the yard and running errands. Before heading out, I offered her an olive branch. "If you clean up the mess from last night and straighten up the house, I'll take you out to TGI Fridays for dinner. We can split a plate of ribs." It wasn't much, but it was my way of trying to restore some normalcy. As the probationary year began, Bree seemed to embrace her role wholeheartedly. She became an attentive and doting wife, and her efforts felt genuine. Our meals improved dramatically. Dinner often featured a small salad or soup, a hearty main course like steak with potatoes or vegetables, and even dessert. Each meal was accompanied by a glass of wine. Afterward, we worked together to clean up. Our closeness also intensified, becoming more frequent and passionate. Bree made it clear there was nothing she wouldn't do to rekindle the spark between us. One evening, over a particularly good dinner, Bree broke the silence with a casual remark. "I spoke to Emily today." I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Oh? What about?" Bree smiled faintly. "You, me, and her." "What did she say?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Well," Bree began, "the first thing she did was invite me to lunch. She took me to one of her favorite restaurants nearby. Over a couple of glasses of wine and some salad, I asked her point blank if she planned to take you away from me. She laughed and said, 'Absolutely not. Ty and I were a one-time thing. We're best friends now, but we'll never be together like that again. If anything, I think he's still upset about how hurt he was by your actions.'" Bree hesitated, then continued. "I told her how ashamed I am of what I did to you and to our marriage. I also told her about your decision to date other women once a month and reevaluate our relationship at the end of the year." "And what was her advice?" I asked. "She said, don't try to compete with other women. Instead, make staying home with you so irresistible that he won't want to go on those dates. Turn your home into the better option. That's exactly what I plan to do." "If that's your strategy," I replied with a small grin, "don't be surprised if I set up a fake date just to see what you've got planned." A few weeks later, I found myself walking into the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris with a smile on my face. Emily, as usual, was stationed at her desk, guarding the entrance to the partners' offices. When she saw me, her face lit up. She stood and walked over to greet me, wrapping me in a warm hug. "Ty, it's great to see you," she said warmly. "We've been expecting you, or rather, Mr. Thomas has." As I held her briefly, I asked, "Any idea what he wants to talk to me about?" Emily smirked. "Of course I know everything that happens here. But it's better if you hear it from him." She returned to her desk and buzzed Mr. Thomas. After a brief exchange, she gestured for me to follow her, leading me to his office and opening the large, carved wooden door. She gave me a quick smile before closing it behind me. "Ty," Mr. Thomas greeted warmly, standing and extending his hand. "Good to see you again. Please, have a seat." I took the chair opposite him, and he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I wanted to talk to you for two reasons, both of which directly or indirectly involve you." He paused for a moment before continuing. "First, I thought you'd like to know that we've updated our company's fraternization policy. It's much more comprehensive now. It explicitly outlines the consequences of workplace relationships, whether between employees or employees and clients. I've got a copy here for you to review at your leisure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it." I thanked Mr. Thomas for addressing the issue I had brought to his attention previously. His thoughtfulness and initiative had not gone unnoticed. "Ty," he said, his tone considerate, "without prying too much, how are things at home? I genuinely hope you and Bree are finding your way forward." He paused briefly before adding, "I visited Bree's department a few days ago. We didn't talk about anything personal, strictly work-related matters. I wanted to check on her team's progress and see if there were any challenges I could help with. From what I observed, she seemed happy and at ease. Not wanting to delve into the current state of my marriage, I kept my response simple. Things are improving, and I'm optimistic that we'll be all right in the long run." Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Now let me tell you the second reason I wanted to speak with you today. It concerns a letter I sent to Hughes, Duvet, and Lewis, the firm where Stanley Wilbur is employed. Despite everything, Stanley did provide excellent assistance with a particularly complex tax issue we faced. His expertise was instrumental, and I made sure to acknowledge that. However, he added, lifting a piece of paper from his desk, I also felt compelled to address another, less favorable aspect of his behavior. I thought you might want to hear what I wrote. Adjusting his glasses, Mr. Thomas began to read aloud. Dear Steve, you have already received an official performance report regarding Stanley Wilbur's contributions to Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. His knowledge and expertise were invaluable in resolving a challenging tax case, and he went above and beyond by equipping our attorneys with skills to manage similar cases in the future. However, this letter is informal and private, intended to share a different perspective. While Stanley demonstrated commendable technical abilities, his personal conduct during his time here was problematic. He initiated a relationship with one of our married employees, which escalated to physical involvement. This inappropriate relationship caused significant turmoil in the employee's personal life, straining her marriage to the point where its future remains uncertain. Lawyers already contend with a less-than-stellar reputation in the public eye, often seen as valuing profit over ethics or winning over justice. In this profession, integrity is paramount. Stanley's actions raise concerns about his personal honesty, which could very well extend to his professional behavior. With this in mind, I urge you to monitor the work Stanley performs at your firm carefully. While this letter is strictly between us, I trust you'll take whatever action you believe is appropriate, or none at all. The choice is yours. Sincerely, William. Mr. Thomas folded the paper and set it aside. This letter doesn't capture everything Stanley put you and Bree through, but it ensures that his actions won't come without repercussions. I doubt this will help him advance in his career, at least not as quickly as he might hope. This is the best I can do for you, Ty, he continued. I hope it brings some sense of closure, knowing that Stanley won't escape unscathed. I nodded, gratitude evident in my expression. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Your support means a lot to me. As I left his office, I found myself lost in thought, processing the conversation. I didn't even notice Emily standing nearby until she gently interrupted. How are you feeling about everything? She asked softly, studying my face. I took a moment before replying. Honestly, I feel good about how it's all played out. Things are starting to come together. I can't thank you enough for being there for me through all of this. Emily smiled warmly and pulled me into a tight hug. Don't forget, Ty, she said softly. I've grown from this too. I really did love you while we were together. And I loved you too, I replied, my voice steady yet filled with emotion.